Today's video is for 3 separate dishes that all come together to form a delicious plate of food. I'll be crumbing some lamb loin chops and pork loin chops. I'll be making Mike's mum's recipe for a really lovely white German cabbage salad. And I'll also be making Elizabeth David's easy recipe for a potato Dauphinois. It's family friendly and, quite economical. And this is how it goes. So I have quite a collection of French cookbooks. I love them. And each one of them has got a recipe for potato Dauphinois. However, the one that I'm using today is the one that Mike and I like the best. And it's by Elizabeth David, and it's also the easiest. Just a few ingredients, not even nutmeg. But what it does is it creates a bit of a sauce which pairs beautifully with the crumb chops. So you'll need a gratin dish, and the best gratin dishes are ones with a lot of surface area, and when you layer the potatoes they need to come up within 2 centimetres of the top, and this dish is 2 quarts, 2 litres or 8 cups Australian. And the first thing I do is prepare the dish. So I just have a peeled garlic clove here that I'm just going to smash a little bit, and then I rub this dish all over with the garlic clove just to impregnate a little bit of garlic flavour. It's very gentle. And I'll just discard that bit of garlic and then grease it really well with some butter. So Elizabeth David says to use fir apple pink, which is similar to Desiree in Australia, or kifler potatoes, and anything other than that is second best. And I'm telling you, second best still tastes delicious because I've only ever made it with normal potatoes. And these today are charisma potatoes, but you could use any potatoes really. But if you can access kifler, I recommend them. I think they would be delicious. I'm just going to go and peel them, and that's 1 kilo. So now you have to slice these really thin as a 20-cent coin or a penny. And if you have a mandolin, it will make light work of this, but I don't have one. So I just slice them by hand. Now, a really important step is to rinse these well and then dry them well. And see how thin that is? My fingers, you can see through the slices. And to dry them, I just get a clean tea towel with a microfiber cloth. I just pat them dry. Because my potatoes were all different sizes, I'm just going to reserve the big slices for the top layer so it looks nice. And then just pile the potatoes in sort of layers. This goes in a really slow oven, 150 degrees conventional, which is only 130 degrees Celsius with a fan. And it cooks for about 90 minutes. Now my top layer, something like that. So the next thing I do is season it well with salt and pepper. And you'll notice I didn't season between the layers, and that's okay, because when I pour the cream on and it's a slow cook, the salt and pepper will permeate all the dish. But salt well. And you can use white pepper or black pepper. So Elizabeth David says a half a pint of cream per 1 pound of potatoes, but incrementally decrease the more potatoes. However, I don't put quite that amount of cream. So for this 1 kilo of potatoes, I put 300 mils of cream, and then pour this evenly over the potatoes, and then dot with little tiny bits of butter, as much or as little as you want. I've probably got about 3 tablespoons here. It's an extravagantly rich dish, but it pairs beautiful with the chops and the white cabbage salad. So now, unlike quite a few recipes, this one goes into the oven uncovered for 90 minutes in total, well, until the potatoes are tender. So I'm going to check them at 80 minutes. And if it's not browning, I'll crank up the oven for the last 10 minutes. I've got half a head of cabbage here, and only if you have time. But did you know if you soak cabbage in cold water for an hour, it really crisps it up? And submerge it. You might have to weight it down with a plate. or something heavy, just for an hour. And in the meantime, while that's crisping up, I'm going to make the dressing. This is my mother-in-law's recipe from Germany, and she first made it for me years ago on her first visit to Australia, and I had my cafe back then, and it was delicious in sandwiches, in rolls. It was really yum. If you go to a bakery in Germany and they have their beautiful bread rolls with the ham and the cheese and the cabbage, that's the cabbage. Normally my mother-in-law would soak it with a lot of this dressing, but for me today I'm using it as purely as a dressing, so I don't want it soaked. So I've halved the recipe, and you'll need a really small little onion or even a French shallot, and then just chop that up finely and place that in a little saucepan. Then simply into that put half a cup of vinegar, 125 mils, and I'm just using apple cider vinegar, a third a cup of white sugar, and I'll put the grams in the measurements on the website, a half a cup of neutral oil, I'm using light olive oil, a half a teaspoon of yellow mustard seeds, a half a teaspoon of salt, and if you can get it, a half a teaspoon of celery salt. If you can't and you've got a stick of celery, grate that in instead. And then all you have to do is simply bring that to the boil on the stove, just stirring until the sugar's dissolved. And basically as soon as it comes to the boil, turn it off, and that's done. And I'll just pour it into the jug and let it cool down. It's a really lovely dressing. So I'm going to be crumbing some lamb chops today and a couple of pork chops. The price of those little lamb cutlets are over $50 a kilo, and these are little lamb loin chops, and you can usually pick them up for at least half that price. And they crumb lovely, and actually there's much more meat on them than those little cutlets. With the lamb loin chops, I just cut off a little bit of fat, you know, the excess fat. And I realise there is a bone there, but I just flatten them just a little bit with the flattening side of the mallet. Like that. And then I just squeeze over a little bit of lemon juice, and the lemon helps tenderise the meat and also gives it a lovely little flavour. Now I put them back in the fridge for about half an hour to an hour. Crumbed pork loin chops are delicious. My daughter put me onto this, and you don't really have to flatten these because pork cooks quicker than lamb. I just take the rind of fat off, if there is any, and just leave that little band of fat on the chop. So for crumbing, it's the usual flour, egg and breadcrumbs. So just a couple of things I may do a bit differently is for every egg I add a teaspoon of water and a teaspoon of oil. The oil in particular helps the crumbs stick to the protein. And another thing I like to do is make sure the protein is dry before I start crumbing it. And one last thing, I season the meat. And one side is enough. Well, that's what I think anyway. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. So simply flour, lots of egg wash, and then the crumbs. And use your favourite crumbs. These are gluten-free breadcrumbs. And it doesn't hurt to put these back in the fridge now just to firm up a little bit. Ah, here it is. So for the lamb ones, in the crumb it's totally optional, but I just sort of squeeze or, you know, grind a bit of rosemary between my fingers, not too much. It's quite a strong herb. And the same thing with the lamb chops. I just dry them, season them with a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. And when I work it in a batch, I like to just flour them all first, and then I only have to worry about the egg and breadcrumbs. If the little tail starts to fall off, just press it together, and when you crumb it, it will sort of hold it all together. And I'll pop them back in the fridge and I'll let them firm up for a little bit, not long, maybe 15, 20 minutes. So the gratin has had 80 minutes, and I'm just going to see if it's tender. It's getting there, but what I'll just do is take a little of that cream and put it over the top. I'm just going to pop this back into that slow oven Probably for another 15 minutes. So this has had 80 minutes, I'll put it back in for 15, 95 minutes all up. So the cabbage has been soaking in the cold water for an hour, and now I'm just going to put it in the colander and drain all that water out of it. And I just shake that water out really crisp. And using my microfiber cloths again, I just love them. I'll just make sure it's nice and dry and then shred it as finely as I can. And you know, this will last like 3 to 4 days in your fridge. It will get a bit softer, but you know, you can still use it for sandwiches, for a side dish, for salads, for coleslaw. Now I just take the dressing that has cooled down now and pour that all over the cabbage salad. I'll just work that through a little bit. It's a bit hard in this bowl, to be honest. And put that in the fridge to chill up. Oh, that looks nice, smells beautiful. So that has had 95 minutes and it is tender as. But now what I do is I just scrunch up a bit of baking paper, lay it over the top, and then I cover it with a clean towel and just let that rest while I fry the chops. I put enough oil in to cover the base and then a knob of butter. And initially you want this at quite a medium high-ish heat, just to sear it. And then I'm going to turn it down and cook the chops until they are very brown, which will ensure they're cooked through. And don't overcrowd the pan. I'll do 3 lamb chops and a pork chop in that batch. And when shallow frying like this, move your pan a lot and have a little peek every now and then. So that's had 3 minutes, that pork chop. It's lovely and brown. I'm just going to turn it over and cook the other side. And as soon as I turn over the chops, I'm going to lower the heat now a little bit so that second side doesn't brown too quick. Another way I cook the lamb chops sometimes is to give them a quick fry first, just to get a little bit of colour, and then I pop them onto a rack over a tray and finish them in a hot oven about 180 degrees Celsius with a fan or 200 conventional for about 13 minutes. They turn out lovely and moist and pink, but not crunchy like the pan-fried ones, but still absolutely delicious. So that's had 9 minutes all up now, and that's enough. And place the chops on a rack just to rest for a few minutes. And what I like to do is just put a little bit of salt. Anything fried benefits from a little bit of salt when you take it out of the oil. That's been resting for about 15 minutes. And the potatoes have absorbed a lot more of the cream, but there is still a little bit of cream underneath, which is so lovely with the sauce. And the cabbage salad has been in the fridge for about half an hour with the dressing on, and it's lovely and glossy and crunchy and yum. First of all, the pork chop, still nice and hot. It's been resting now for about 4 minutes and beautifully cooked. It's juicy and not overcooked. Beautiful. If you want it a bit more pink, just cook it less. Nice bit of cabbage salad. Some potato bake or gratin or Dauphinois. And that is one delicious meal. And apart from a few vegetarians, I don't know anyone would turn their nose up at that plate of food. It's really delicious. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.